Hi, this is Anthony, parent of IRS Medic, and I want to share with you a pretty crazy story. And unfortunately, it's what we kind of know to be true, things that we happen to know be true. And here it is. The story is from New Zealand. Kids stuck with $2,000 bill for each Kiwisaver. Now, I'm saying this is a channel that involves U.S. taxation, so who cares, right? Who cares what happens in New Zealand? Not our problem. Except when we get down to one thing here. New Zealand children born to parents who are citizens of the United States face a difficult Kiwi Saver choice. Give up your U.S. citizenship or face a Kiwi Saver tax compliance bill of $750 or more a year, courtesy of the U.S. taxman. And wow, that is actually true. And so joining me today, we have Keith Richardson sorry, Keith Redmond and John Richardson. I morphed those two today. So we're going to be talking about John's article. John really wrote a fantastic article that really makes you think here, and how really. And here's really what we're getting to. It's actually the U.S. tax treaties. Look, there's a lot of problems, but the U.S. tax treaties here are really the bigger problem. And here's just one thing I want to say as a tax attorney who handles cases like this all the time. They're not kidding. They're not kidding when they're saying, yeah, no, there's a crazy compliance cost for each year to do this. And it's really a difficult thing to actually determine. And the penalties are sort of either which way they can be. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, let's introduce John Richardson. John, tell me about your article here. What's going on?
Well, um, what was going on was I, of course, saw the article out of New Zealand, and thought, well, really, it's more of a human interest story, I think, and it's a big problem. But it's very, very clear, and people need to understand that this is not, as the article seems to suggest, something that New Zealand is doing wrong by not carving out, changing their legislation to let people ditch these Kiwi savers. This is the direct result of U.S. citizenship taxation and the U.S. attempting to impose domestic tax policies on U.S. citizens living outside the United States. And, so maybe that's old news for people, but I think that what this does do is create an opportunity for a reminder. But the reason this is going on is much more than just U.S. domestic tax legislation that makes everybody in the world a U.S. tax resident. It's very much the result of the U.S. treaty network, all right, when they all include a saving clause. And what the saving clause is, we'll get into in more detail, but what it really means is that U.S. citizens simply don't generally, unless it's a specified exception, get the benefit of anything to do with the tax treaty at all. And as part of the tax treaty, believe it or not, the other country, in this case, New Zealand, agrees that that the United States retains the right to tax its citizens in any way, shape, or form that it wants. And by agreeing to this, what New Zealand, Canada, Australia, the rest of the world done incredibly is completely just, surrendered their sovereignty and agreed that the U.S. can come in and actually capture residents of those other countries, say, you are a U.S. tax subject, you are our property, and we alone will run your lives. And and of course, you know what it means to run their lives. It means punitive taxation. It means, penalty-laden reporting requirements. But perhaps most significantly, it means that a U.S. citizen living outside the United States is denied the benefits that these tax systems in Australia, New Zealand, what have you, clearly provide for other residents of the country. So it's another example of how U.S. citizenship taxation has totally depreciated U.S. citizenship. And if U.S. citizens were stocks, they would trade at a discount relative to every other citizenship on the planet for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. has created essentially a fiscal prison. And that's kind of the bottom line. So I thought that this might be an interesting opportunity to remind people how these treaties work, what the saving clause is, and what the dynamic of this particular problem is.
And yeah, let's get down to business on the savings clause, because this is the entire thing. When I talk to people all the time, they'll say, "Well, the U.S. tax treaty says this, and the treaty says this," and then I have to say, "Yeah, there's the savings clause." And the savings clause basically, can do anything and basically negate an entire treaty. My question before we get to that, Joe John, would U.S. persons living in New Zealand be better off if there was no tax treaty?
I think that they would be better off, actually. At least many of them would be better off. There are certain minor, I'm trying to think of an area where the tax treaty really helps them. It does not, by the way, prevent double taxation, which is a myth out there in the
Right, right, yeah.
tax community, completely idiotic. Because although there's a double taxation clause, it's always subject to the individual laws of the country, et cetera. So I don't think that they'd be better off, and I think that probably they're worse off, because what's happening, right, is that we're talking about New Zealand. New Zealand is actually agreeing. I mean, this is extraordinary, extraordinary. Okay, imagine New Zealand is actually agreeing to effectively surrender a subset of its residents
Oh,
to
yeah.
the United States for
Yeah.
the purposes of taxation, right, or anything else. And then you ask yourself, well, is this just a problem for the U.S. citizen? No, it's a problem for the country, because these tax systems incentivize retirement planning, so the government doesn't have to protect people in old age. So these U.S. citizens who can't take advantage of these particular programs are much more likely to be, well, they're going to be much more likely to be financially disabled and a public charge. And I know this might be shocking, but I'm wondering if countries ought to simply ban immigration from U.S. citizens, period, for this reason.
That would be, yeah, it seems like something is needed. Now, we were talking about, was it last week or the week before, but I might have thrown out a theory about why is the European Union caving on FATCA? Why are they just sort of giving this all up, making their own citizens as second-class citizens for the U.S. when there's really no need to, and especially when the U.S. is not reciprocal. Not that the need to be reciprocal is all that great. I find it interesting here that New Zealand is selling out its people just like the EU, huh? Isn't that something? They're doing it too. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, they're totally in different time zones. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
But it's not
uh,
just the two, it's also Canada
and
and
it's
other
also
countries.
yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, as we go around the globe,
Well,
provide.
Anthony, if I may, I think the three of us might agree on the following sentence, okay? Which is this, that the U.S., remember I said last week, we were talking about extradition treaties, that the purpose of the extradition treaty was to extend U.S. criminal law outside the jurisdiction of the United States.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that the purpose of the tax treaties, these savings clauses, largely, it's not the only purpose, but it clearly has the effect of extending U.S. tax jurisdiction outside the United States. And he who has the gold makes the rules. I mean, if you can capture these people as tax residents, I mean, I don't really see, at the end of the day, I don't see a lot of difference between that and sending in an occupying army.
Yeah, and that's what we have here. Except no army was sent, just
It's a
here.
financially occupying army.
Right. It's financially occupied, and everyone, and it's amazing. Everyone in New Zealand is just incapable of standing up to the United States. Say, oh, okay, well, the United States wants that. All right, we
Well,
better do
I don't
that.
know if they understand it. I mean, that's the interesting thing. But, contextually, to add something else that I was reading about this week, imagine this, okay? The Canada Revenue Agency, the Canadian equivalent of the IRS,
Hmm.
there really is an equivalent to the IRS anywhere, but you know what I mean, is actually announced that they are going to be auditing Canadian banks starting in early 2023 to make sure that they are complying with their obligations under the Income Tax Act of Canada, which are really found in the FATCA IGAs, right? So, this is really, really extraordinary. In other words, the Canada Revenue Agency has effectively just stepped into the shoes of the IRS to audit not the individual taxpayers. Well, who knows? Maybe that's coming. Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be
But,
nice.
to go after these banks to make sure that their due diligence procedures are meet the standard of what's required under the FATCA IGAs. And I really wonder what the result of this audit is going to be, because I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just not sure. I think it's worth discussing whether using a single form for both FATCA and CRS does meet the requirements of doing this. I mean, that'll be an interesting question. But why are they auditing at all? All right, that I don't understand. I mean, I don't see anything that says they have to do this audit, but they're doing this audit.
This is scary, right? And that's what you just said. There's nothing that requires them to have to do this audit, but boy, isn't that interesting? So quickly, they're jumping through hoops, and I'm trying to think to myself, well, what is the benefit to Canada for this? What is the benefit?
Are they doing the audit because of that threat of the 30% withholding penalty? And they want to make sure that all the financial institutions are adhering to the FATCA IGA?
I
Do you
don't
think
I
that?
don't know. I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't know, but I don't think they have to, because the IGA lays out a basic procedure for what happens if there's non-compliance, and this sort of stuff. But what I really found amusing was, how you go online, you find all these tax accountants, trying to instill the fear of God in individual U.S. citizens abroad. Oh my God, if you don't do this or you don't do that, you're going to jail, this sort of stuff.
Right.
Well, there's a Toronto law firm that wrote an article doing the same thing for the banks. God, you need us. Come on, you need help with this coming CRA audit. You'd be better off with a lawyer holding your hand. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, the whole thing is just operating on everybody is afraid of being punished, so they're going out to punish somebody else first.
There you go. Oh my God, there you go.
That's
There
a good
you
way
go.
of putting it.
And you're right, and it's like people are so afraid of that 30% withholding, which I don't know if it's been done yet. I don't know if it's been done.
Yeah, I don't
It's
either.
not possible under the FATCA IGAs. That's the whole point
So wait a
of
second.
the IGA. I don't know why they're
Wait a
doing
second.
this.
FATCA, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, was passed in 2010 as part of the Hire Act.
Mm-hmm.
2010. It's what, 2022 now? 12 years.
12 years.
11
Yep.
years of it being in force. And not once in those 11 years did any bank's withholding ever happen. And so I guess then everyone's 100% compliant, or maybe we had an empty threat. Maybe we had an empty threat, and now there's people in Washington, D.C. laughing over how all these countries are stumbling over themselves to try to comply with a boogeyman that I don't know if it's really real.
Well,
I mean,
didn't the IRS commissioner state that they can't even go through the FATCA data? They
Well,
don't have
that's
to.
that is you're correct, but that's as it applies to individuals on their Form 89
Ah,
38.
got
I'm
it.
not talking about the bank's compliance with
Got
FATCA.
it.
So that is all bad. And I mean, that's the thing. We haven't seen one instance of one bank even I haven't heard of it. I've never gotten a call. I don't know anyone who's heard of it. There's no banks that have ever been threatened with this yet. I can't believe every bank is 100% in compliance.
Right.
No,
I have a hard
of course
time
not
because
compliant.
compliance is hard, because there's really not enough people in the world to really explain what it is, and then you're caught in situations where it doesn't seem like there's a way to comply. And that's actually the background of this. And let me just give you, I'll show you a link to this. This is one of the best articles. Quickly, I want to just give what we're talking about, why the compliance costs are so high. Here's an article John linked to, and it's written by, let me see, way down here. It is a really, really good article. I think one of the best explanations I've seen. It goes on, and this is written by Stuart Clouden, and he is in New Zealand. So here's somebody who knows firsthand exactly how crazy all of this is. And he really does this is what I love he gets down to, really, because this is it. This is it. And here's what you're talking about. This is every taxpayer has a tough decision to make. Rely on the fact that the procedure, and he's talked about a procedure that we think might be the law, but we don't know, may be adjusted to enable Kiwisaver to qualify and not Form 3520, 3528, which are really, really complicated to do and have penalties in the interim. And as long as all taxes paid, then no penalties will arise. Or take the prudent approach of filing the forms and hope that they are not misprocessed by the IRS, that on the basis that no reliance will be placed on the procedure being updated. That is, you look at this and say, oh, you know what, I don't need to do that because hopefully things will be fixed in the future. Or you take the literal approach, which isn't even the literal approach. You're just saying, well, this is all we have. And that is, here's the thing. Not only is the compliance not easy to do, but the guidance we are given is not clear. And I spend more time probably answering these questions on foreign retirement. Should I follow 3520A, 3520? We go over it. We kind of go back and forth. And there's oftentimes not a perfect answer. So that is what we're talking about. This form 3520, 3520A. This is a form that is intended for big time trusts. Big time foreign trust. Well, the IRS considers your foreign retirement to be a trust, to be a foreign trust. Sometimes, maybe, but it might. And we don't know what it.
Issue. That's part of the issue. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but you know what? While we're talking about this, I'm just pulling up the U.S. New Zealand FATCA IGA. I want to go to Annex 2 and see if the Kiwisaver is excluded from reporting.
Okay.
Let me just see if I can find the answer to that quickly.
In the meantime, I'll fill up the dead
airspace. Okay.
You
know, of course, there's a lot of text here, but if you were to look at Annex 2, it seems to me that it may well be that the Kiwisaver is not reported by the banks under the FATCA IGA. I'm not saying that for sure, but it looks to me like that may be the case, which would not surprise me because it's, you know, for example, in Canada, the Canadian TFSA is not reportable under FATCA either. Anyway, I don't know the answer for sure, but I think it would be an interesting addition to the discussion to know whether the Kiwisaver is reportable by the banks. Okay. We have here page 48 excluded from financial accounts, certain savings accounts, retirement and pension. Looks to me like, anyway, it covers a number of tax favored things. I would be willing to bet that the Kiwisaver is not reportable under the FATCA IGA, but I don't know for sure.
So what John's saying is that it's not even, the banks don't even have to report it in FATCA.
I'm saying that may be the case. All right.
Right. And yeah. And so it's because, and I mean, really, we're talking about Kiwisaver accounts, right? We're just talking about.
Anthony, do you think that people open those to evade U.S. tax?
Yeah, no, you know what I think they do? I think they open it up to save money because that's the name of it. That's what I think they do it. I think they open it because they understand that, you know what, they may be active now and be able to earn an income. But
what about these kids, though, that are like 7, 8, 10, 12 years old? Surely they must be opening them to avoid U.S.
Well, yeah, obviously they are. I think the parents are innocent, but the children,
right?
Clearly. And I think, you know what? It's about time. It's about time we teach these brats a lesson, right?
Truth,
hey, man.
And the American way.
You want to avoid taxes on your Kiwisaver, young man. All right. You know, we should come in there and we should really lock these kids up. I'm sure that's coming next. We'll come in and lock them up and freeze them out from the banking system because they didn't fill out a Form 3520, or maybe they did. But either way, let's get rid of them. Now, I want to talk about some solutions right here, because here's one thing. You could just say, well, you know what? Because here's I think, actually a pretty good argument to say, I don't necessarily know if I believe in dual citizenship myself. I don't really believe in it. I think by taking you are a citizen of one country, and by taking citizenship of another country, I think inherently you are no longer loyal to that. Now, as we walked away, and this is the whole issue as we go towards globalism, right? People are like, oh, let me get another passport. We all want other passports for this and that. But why? Oh, it's because our own citizenship stinks. That's why. That's why we want another passport. Not because those are great, but our own really, really stink. And I would say that the fix would be fixing our own passport, our own system, rather than trying to go around the world to say, oh, okay, I'll become a citizen of this country over here too. Because that really doesn't, and that actually doesn't necessarily escape you from the US tax system, as we're seeing all these country people around the world, not US persons, yet they're still subject to FATCA in this sense that banks are doing a due diligence checks. And if there's a suspicion that they're a US person, they may be reported to the US, even though they're not even a US person. So I would say the first thing is I don't know if dual passports are a great thing, but I would say this: you do have a right to live around the world if the country will have you. That is what I would say, that any country that opens their arms to you and says, yes, welcome, come in, I think that's your right to go there.
Anthony, these kids, though, these are the guilty of the most guilty. They were born in New Zealand. They're by far, they were actually trying to take a preemptive strike against U.S. taxation by being born in New Zealand. It was deliberate.
Yeah.
You know
Come
what?
on, Anthony.
It was a deliberate, I
I
guess it was a deliberate choice, right? These tax evading kids, and if we don't
terrible.
make an example of them now, look, here's the thing. They're 9, 14 years old. You're talking about 70, 80, 90 years of non-compliance.
That's right.
Get them now.
Imagine what could happen down the road.
Imagine, if we get these kids and now, here's the big point too that's made. You're doing all this reporting for something where there's no tax due. So it's not even that, hey, the IRS needs the money. It's not about that. It's about, hey, you're going to do this thing that may give us the ability to penalize you crazy later.
It's about control, and it's about controlling the governments of other countries. But I just received a note from Keith.
Okay.
Yeah.
Saying, Keith, you want to?
Yeah, it does. It's one of 11. It's in 11 pages of the document, and I can't remember which page it's on, but it's in bold print that the Kiwisaver is not reportable under FATCA.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to confirm that.
Yeah.
That is interesting, isn't it? Right? It is very, very interesting. Now, a couple of years ago, when I was discussing this with a bunch of people, when the article refers to the $2,000, that's clearly the cost of preparing the Form 3520s, right?
Yeah.
But personally, I think the U.S. has a graceful way out of this. All right, a very graceful way out of it.
All right, let's hear it.
Follows, okay? Rather than trying to enforce this stuff, why not exempt any type of account that is exempt from FATCA reporting under the IGAs from the 3520? You don't even have to research it. Just that. Treasurer's already done the work because these are apparently low-risk accounts. Why not just, let's look. Is it reportable under the FATCA IGA? Nope. No 3520 requirements. Does that make sense to you, Anthony?
Man, that's pretty straightforward.
Too straightforward, perhaps?
That is too, yeah, that's your problem. And I don't know if it allows for enough programs, and it sort of negates programs that people might need. And look, we're talking about a real severe penalty farm that the IRS has with these various forms. You're gut. This is the thing, John. If you take away the IRS's ability to penalize things of which it doesn't need any taxes and doesn't need anything to know, think about how much, like the IRS is going to be handicapped. It can't rule by the fear and intimidation and uncertainty.
Maybe there needs to be a pay-go check to see how much they would lose in penalty revenue by, just what do you think?
Right, and that's the thing. They're looking at every person overseas anyone with a foreign account as at least a potential $30,000 penalty, because anytime you audit them, you got 3 years, right? 3 times 10,000, and if they didn't, if they didn't do their for 3528, right, their 8938 isn't right. So you get them out of 10,000, yeah. So yeah,
Gentlemen, I'm gonna add another angle to this, and you can help me with this based on your expertise. Is the situation with these kids in New Zealand?
I think the word
If
is
they're
criminal. I think the word
Yeah,
is
these
criminal.
criminals.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Well, there's a little bit of reality here. I just want to put in. If these children are not in the U.S. tax system and never will be, where is the risk? Isn't the risk only if they're in the U.S. tax system?
As it
Well,
is
I
right
think there's
now.
risk either way. I think there's two kinds of American citizens at risk: those who
Okay.
are in the U.S. tax system and those who are not in the U.S. tax system.
Okay. The risk is
I think
different
U.S.
between the
citizens
two.
is a very risky proposition. I think that's why all roads lead to
Lead to
renunciation.
renunciation.
Yeah, and you know what? And I know we're going to be running out of time real soon, and I got to
Yeah.
tell you that is what seems to be taken off. I
Okay.
think everybody. So what I'm hearing, Keith, and this is kind of what I'm interested in what you're hearing.
Yeah.
As I'm talking to people, people are, there's a lot of U.S. green card holders living overseas,
Yeah.
and customs is now giving you a hard time. And so people are sort of trying to make up their mind, where do they really want to live?
Yeah.
And that's where people, and that's what I'm talking to. People have kind of made up their mind to say, hey, look, pandemic's over. I went back to US, visited, but you know what? I don't think I really want to go back. And that's where I think we're finding people just making their minds up now. I think, we've had, every UX expat who files a tax return has to be thinking about the renunciation question every time. I don't see how you don't. And I think a lot of people are now just, they know the cost. They're aware of it. They've been following this channel, following John, everybody. They're aware of it. They're sort of waiting for that triggering event to say, okay, that's it. That's
Yeah.
enough. And I think it's picking up. And I think the U.S. really baited a lot of people to come in here.
Yeah.
Making very easy to become a visa holder. Oh, I became a U.S. citizen, U.S. green card holder. Then I moved back overseas, and now I'm doing this, or became a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
And then you forgot about the horrible relationship you made with the IRS.
I've
Um,
also been getting a lot of uptick lately of people contacting me who fall into a particular profile. They are, for whatever reason, they're American, they're a U.S. person, born in the
mm,
U.S., whatever. And they don't, this is the profile, they don't have a U.S. passport, or they had one many, many years ago. They don't have a social security number. They have no ties to the U.S. They got nothing. And their big question is, what do I do? Do I just let it be,
mm,
or do I renounce?
yeah.
Well, the latter is much better for them. But I'm getting a lot of people with that particular profile contacting me.
And it's something to think about. I think about clients who have help renounce. I'm thinking of them right now, and I'm thinking about their year of renunciation. And I've been thinking about, oh yeah, they had 4 or 5 years. I'm not having to deal with this nonsense.
Right. And
You know?
renunciation is a long process right now, depending on where you do it. It can take
Yeah.
up to a year and a half to 2 years in some places.
Well, to get into the consulate, but we're not talking.
Right.
I think, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yes,
Exactly.
that's to
Yeah.
finalize it. But at least
Right.
for the tax issues, that's something that you sort of are able to on your exit
Right.
form.
If one
Yep,
chooses, yes,
yep, yep.
exactly. You can
Right.
do it, whatever.
All right. What else do we want to hit on this topic here before we conclude?
I would like just to summarize the main point of the post, okay, which
Yeah.
is this. So, you know, we're constantly talking about the impact of this on individuals, and that's very real. But the point of the post is this: that what the savings clause does is effectively makes it much more difficult for non-US governments to create these tax incentive retirement planning programs for their populations as a whole, because the fact of US citizenship means that you've got a group of people, a percentage of their residents, okay, who cannot take advantage of this, therefore defeating the purpose of this. And this is another reason why this citizenship taxation stuff has got to end. It is a brutal, brutal, vicious assault, not only on individuals, but on the sovereignty of these other countries, because it interferes with these countries' own abilities to create these programs. And I've given 3 examples in the post. This may have to do to some extent with when these treaties were put together, but the Australian New Zealand treaties were basically from 1982. The Australian Superannuation and the Kiwisaver were created after that, and we all know the problems, okay, vis-a-vis US citizens. We have the Canadian TFSA that was created in 2009, only 1 year after the last sort of update to the Canada-US tax treaty. So, the bottom line is that this problem of citizenship taxation, coupled with the saving clause, which is really where the other country agrees to it, that we agree that we're going to essentially turn this segment of our population over to the United States, is a huge problem for the sovereignty of those countries. And, I have a suggestion for how this could be solved in a way that would solve a lot of the problems, okay, but would leave citizenship taxation intact. And that is that what you do, see, all the savings clauses have exceptions to, and the savings clause doesn't apply, in this particular case. And what I think should happen at a minimum is that when a U.S. citizen is, 1, a tax resident of the other country, say Canada, and 2, meets the 9/11 test in the Internal Revenue Code for bona fide residents in that country, then they should not be treated as a U.S. citizen for the purposes of taxation. See, that allows the U.S. to keep U.S. citizenship taxation generally intact, but not have it apply, to people who are tax residents of other countries. And I think, that may be a middle ground. And I think that, that these other countries, and of course, Karen Alpert with her Fix the Tax Treaty group and that sort of thing, I think is advocating for this type of stuff. But this is what these countries have got to do. I am convinced that they don't even know what they're signing.
I think that is, well, you know what? The devil's in the details. And I mean, what bigger details is the tax code?
All you do,
right?
if you look at the post, okay, I've given
Yeah.
excerpts from those 3 particular treaties, including both the savings clause and the exception. Okay, if you want to put it up on the screen and just go to the bottom,
Yep.
Anthony,
Yeah. Okay.
quickly as I continue on with this.
Yeah, I'm moving along here. Yeah, you got it. Right.
Okay, get out of the, okay, so take a look at the bottom. Go to any one of them, I don't care, Appendix C, saving
Okay.
clause. Now,
Yep.
what it says, okay, except as provided in paragraph 3, nothing shall be construed as preventing a contracting state from taxing its residents. In the case of the United States, its citizens, blah, 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 okay? You'll notice in 3, it says the provisions of paragraph 2 shall not affect the obligations under, in relation to, there are certain things that are carved out. And I think what you do is you carve out, all right, you but anyway, it's right there, okay, in paragraph 3 or the equivalent, where what you would do is add some kind of an exception in there. And, and that would go a long way towards solving these problems. It would, I don't know that it wouldn't end citizenship taxation, but what it would do is largely end the complicity of other governments in enforcing it, right?
All right. I mean, this is the thing we're offering, and this is all we do is we offer reasonable solutions. And all our viewers do is offer reasonable solutions. And all we have is a million ways to fix this. There's a million ways we could fix this craziness.
Well, the ultimate solution is the one that almost nobody supports. We support it on this call, but nobody else, which is for all times to sever citizenship from definitions of tax residence. Why the hell should somebody be taxed just because they were born somewhere? I mean, look at the insanity of, this ridiculous article coming out of New Zealand, right? Which I think will largely be interpreted as sort of a human interest story. But imagine the insanity. You see those 4 kids there? I don't know why they're smiling.
Four.
Okay?
Yeah, why are they smiling?
Look,
You know what?
They
would look great in stripes.
Special windfall income tax if they can afford braces, okay?
You know what I would love? I would love a Black Hawk helicopter to land in New Zealand, pick those kids up, and bring them to Gitmo. That's where they need to be. Learn them a lesson.
Well, they're going to have to find a use for it when when they close it. But look, this is the problem, okay? Those kids are not going to grow up with the same opportunities as their friends and neighbors in New Zealand.
Yeah,
Why? Because they were born to a U.S. citizen parent. That's the only reason.
look at that. I know, right? And they don't know, right?
And I remember once Obama, was making the speech and saying, the circumstances of your birth should never determine the outcome of your life. Well, Mr. Citizenship Tax and FATCA,
Yeah.
I mean, good God.
All right. Well, hey, we're gonna conclude here. We're out of time here. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this incredible story. John, thank you so much for your research. Keith, thanks you so much for keeping us informed of what's really going on in the community. Really appreciate that. We are going to be hitting some, John. We have some ideas in the future, right? We have some ideas about some topics we're going to hit in the future, right? Might have some. We might have some technical things coming out as we.
Yeah, we can do the guilty.
Yeah,
Not all Americans are guilty.
all Americans are guilty, and what we're talking about is, we do talk about sort of how outrageous this is, but it's also helpful, and I think it's really helpful for people to see actually what it is. Now, of course, no one in Congress would ever watch this video in a million years because they never want to be responsible for the nonsense that they signed that they don't even know what it is.
Well, they're doing damage to those four smiling kids, and this is the American. By the way, to be clear,
Yeah.
this is the American way. This
Yes.
is what America stands for. No ifs, ands, or buts. It speaks for itself.
We're not the good guys, that's like we haven't been the good. I don't know what good guys are, but we're not them. Like that's
Unless
not
you believe, unless you seriously believe, as I'm sure some congressmen do, that the birth of those people outside the United States was for the purpose of avoiding U.S. taxation. What do you think, Anthony?
I mean, doesn't that have to be their logical premise in order to have this nastiness? Isn't that seems to be the unstated belief system that they have? Because there's really no other explanation for this. You must believe these kids were born outside the U.S. too, so that you could not possess them and you could not tax them and you could not own them. Therefore, because they try to escape, they deserve everything. They deserve everything that you send them and nothing less, because they are the ones who are destroying America, right? All right, so yeah, John and I are going to be talking about some more technical things for those of you who are so interested. And here's what I'll tell you, I'll conclude with this. I got a little excited the other day and I realized it because we have a lot of tax professionals who watch this channel. And I know that because I was looking at our stats and I got excited because I was doing that project for It's History, the It's History channel with Ryan Socash. And he was basically telling me, he goes, look, our entire audience is male. Our entire audience is like 95% male. I was like, oh, okay, really? Like, oh yeah, history is just a male audience. Well, guess what? We're 25% female. Watch this. And I was like, so I flattered myself. Then I'm like, oh, tax professionals. But that's good. So I'm flattering myself again. So we have some of the best tax professionals around the world who watch this channel. And so we're going to bring some things for you and let us know if there's something you need, some questions you have, and you can have our contact information below. Okay, with that, this is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to subscribe.